r/NoSleep. Posted by u/windowssandbox. My experience of doing 11 miles ritual. Staring at the sky, the big round moon made the forest darken even further and no stars were to be seen in the night sky. I clenched the wheel more, sonic of the fingers searching for one of the worn handles of the gears. This was the night I had prepared for, the night when I was to try the 11 miles ritual that many tourists had tried before me, yet only a few succeeded. I had been told about it by a friend from school who said it was a sure method of getting what I most wanted. Reluctantly intrigued by the phenomena, I had taken the necessary time and effort to do my homework. The ritual was simple: accomplish driving 11 real miles only through one specific road in the forest, which remains unnamed in this case. On the way, as you might imagine, I was to meet all sorts of unnatural events, the scale of each progressively increasing. That was my thinking as I faced them all and did not turn back. My wish would come true. About to reach the entrance of the clinic, I inhaled deeply, and hoped with all my heart as I stepped on the small trackless trail. Events are getting more horrid. The trees opened up to canopy, formed fingers like those of a corpse. Only the low beams of the car's headlights were visible in the darkness. Still I continued to go on as I wished to complete the journey. The first mile passed without incident. Nothing happened, even the sound of my car was restricted to the squelching of the gravel. The third notable change was the temperature rise. As I entered into the second mile of the run I felt colder. I automatically reached for the heater switch, and feeling cold, turned it up, though it had a marginal effect. My breath was conditional and I could see it fogging the windshield, but I did not introduce a halt. It was at the third mile that the influenza began to rear its foggy head on the asphaltage of the road. I slowed down and peeped forward to check on the path leading forward. Shapes at the periphery of my field of view contouring my vision danced a waltz at the tips of my eyeballs. But there was no sound, only the fog that seemed to whisper my name, getting louder and louder, but I shook it. I had to focus on the path. By the fourth mile, I was apparently disturbing the fauna and sounds started to become audible in the forest. Barking, gnashing of teeth and screeching filled the air. My hands became shaky only on the wheel, while my foot pressed firmly on the accelerator pedal. The road also had much undulations, but the movement was sideways, and I could not be quite sure where we were heading most of the time. Fifth, there was the feeling of detestation. This type of feeling is oppressive. It is as if a big cloth had been pulled over the head and the feeling was invariable. I could have palpable sense of a mysterious presence and felt as though I was being observed, yet no one was looking at me. Looking into the rearview mirror, I did not see anything. However, the feeling remained within me, bothering my nerves. Finally, at the 6th mile, a brief buzz could be heard from the radio, swarming with some noises. I stretched a hand to switch it off, but a language that was unknown to me came out of the noise in form of voice. The voice was emotionless, cold, and this sternness gave me the chills. I ground my teeth, which wasn't easy because I wanted to make a stand against this kind of thinking. The 7th mile was quite dark. My headlights were nothing less than black holes. I focused my love on that dark path and just cruised blindly as in a blind man's bluff. There were images, but the faces were blurred. My heart began to patter. I felt tight inside all over. The 8th mile experiences a highly suffocating feeling of isolation. Everything around my car disappeared as if I was in a vacuum. I composed myself, cursing the suddenly nervous feeling that was telling me to get out. I quickly dismissed it and brought my focus back to the matter at hand. It was at the 9th mile that the car started pulsating as if it wanted to expel me out of it. I held the wheel tightly, which accentuated my efforts at least to keep it from trembling. The road, which seemed to move in front of me like a bent sheet of metal, I did not ease up at all. The 10th mile was nothing but the display of sheer hopelessness. Recollections of my worst times started to overwhelm me, and then I started crying, but the key was still in my hands, and I kept on driving towards the light. Thus, I got to the 11th mile. The trees parted to show a clearing with the light of the moon on it. I braked the car, feeling a loud beating in my chest. I had made it. I went out, the chilly night air refreshing my lungs as I murmured my prayerful wish out loud. There was pin-drop silence in the forest and the air was calm. I stood stock still, my breath caught in my throat, and then, it came, the calmness, the feeling that what I had wished for has been granted, and with a happy grin on my face, I walked away. I had passed through the 11 miles ritual, and what was left was my greatest fantasy in life. However, the end of the story has not been written yet. Looking back to the car, I saw that the scenery had altered. The clearing has been replaced by a forest that seemed to stretch on for eternity. The trail which I had taken for getting there was no longer visible, and I had no idea where to head next. My feelings for him had changed drastically. I felt only panic, but I controlled myself. All of this had to have an exit strategy of some sort. I went back to the car and attempted to follow the route I had taken earlier. However, the road looked different. The kilometers fell one by one, but no familiar images appeared. It was as if the forest was alive and it was constantly moving to ensure that I was confined within it. I went on driving and the feeling of fear intensifying with each moment that passed by. The first disturbing signal occurred at a point that I judged to be the 12th mile. The car began to jerk and the engine made a choking sound as if it was about to die. I looked at the fuel indicator, the needle was pointing to full. I clutched the wheel tightly and my hands shook as I willed the car to go on. The engine purred back to life and again the feeling washed over me like a wave. One more time at the 13th mile the radio came to life. This time the voice was sharper, louder, it was a commanding voice. It whispered my name to me repeatedly, and each time the words were dripping with a sickly evil. I attempted to block it out, however I could not. The voice appeared to be all around them, making the car an unpleasant place to be for the young woman. It was getting colder by the 14th mile through the temperature drop. Fog settled on the windshield and I could barely see through it. I switched on the defroster but this did not aid the situation at all. The cold crept into my bones, my fingers and toes went completely numb. I could hardly touch the pedals that were under me but I tried to remain focused and continue driving. The kind of change that was introduced at the end of the 15th mile deserves a special mention. It appeared that the trees of the forest started to get closer to the road I was traveling. Its branches touched the car's structure. It was the worst type of sound, similar to nails on the blackboard. I bent down to the steering wheel, my hands tightening the grip on it, my knuckles turning white from strain. Again at the 16th mile the fog came on thicker than before. It devoured the headlights and I was almost in complete darkness. I looked around and slowly and cautiously started to crawl forward. The ground seemed to be rough and uneven. The fog appeared to come alive and envelope the car as if the car was alive and spoke in hushed tones and whispered menacingly. Well, to tell the truth, I had almost no strength to walk by the 17th mile. I get tired, my eyes were red, headache, and I could easily get irritable. I wanted to stop, to rest, but I know I cannot do that and I pushed forward. The idea of stopping correlated to the idea of quitting, and I did not feel that I was ready for that. I had come too far to turn back now. The 18th mile was the worst. The line is quite simple, and the presented thought is quite clear, so the main focus in identifying the main idea is made on the choice of the right words. They could not help but feel alone all the time. It was as if I was the only one left in the world and everybody had turned against me and wanted me dead. I tightly clenched my fists and did not shed a tear. I concentrated on the further path. Something had to stop this. That had to be it. There must be a way out. When I got to the 19th point there was shaking again in the car. This time it was a more violent shake, the whole car as if trying to shake itself apart in a violent shiver. I choked the words down, clenching my teeth and praying that the car would not break apart. The road moved and contorted in front of me and I did not stop. The 20th mile was the most terrible. The night was pitch black, the blackness that engulfs you and drips with darkness. This I could sense was a pressure that was weighing me down, choking me in a way. It was the finality of it that pushed me forward, that told me I was nearly there. Just one more mile. And to the end of the 21st mile I arrived at last. The forest parted once more and it appeared that the group was taken to a place they knew well, the glade. I stopped the car. I was trembling and my heart was thumping so loudly within my chest. I had made it. I went out, breathing in the cold night air. I said the words out aloud, the 3 words I wished to be said to me. There was no sound to be heard except the occasional rustling of the leaves at the forest floor. I stood still for a few moments and then I could feel it, a calmness was enveloping me, and I knew my wish had been granted, and so with a happy heart I left. As for the last 11 miles ritual that seemed to take even more than the usual time, I had survived it and had only one desire left. It was time to return the car and I noticed that the scenery was different yet again. The trees and the greenery that was once seen was no longer present, it was replaced by the usual concrete building and edifices. I was home. I climbed into the car and drive off, that feeling of relief washed over me. I had done it. I had passed through the 11 miles ritual and the greatest wish any man could wish for had been granted to me. I was driving through the city and for the first time in years I felt that calmness deep inside me. The future was open, and I realized that no matter what, I would be able to deal with it. It had been quite a long and tiresome trip, but they knew that it had been worth it. I had go through my fears, challenged the unknown, and I had come out as a winner. And as I drove into the sunrise, I realized that I was the strongest that I have ever been. However, the ritual has changed me. I could not forget what had happened on this night. The voices of the trees were ringing in my head. I knew I would never be the same, that something had been done to me from which there could be no going back. Still, I was grateful. The ritual had provided me what I had craved for, and that was the reason, which made me grateful to it till my last breath. Soon, as I looked at the future, I knew that no matter what, I could go through it and conquer all. The 11 miles ritual had challenged me to my core, and I had come out a stronger person. And so I moved forward, the road still in front of me to traverse. It was far from the end of the trip as I was waiting for the next twist. I had stood in the dark and come out in the light, and no matter what I am going to face in my life, I know I can come through it. That 11 miles ritual was now over, but what I learned from it would remain with me for the rest of my life. I had also realized that I am capable of withstanding a lot of pressure and that no one can break me down. So as I drove into the future, the lessons that I learned were imprinted on my heart, and they would never leave me, never forsake me, even in the blackest of nights.